Fernald State School won't let me go. I first came here when I was a boy to visit my uncle. He was one of thousands, millions across America, held at institutions. I was fascinated by my uncle and the stories he told. I made a film about him, how he got to Fernald, his life before and after, and his relationship to my family, the family that brought him to the institution. He got out in 1978. He lived and thrived in the community until a car accident took his life. And though my Uncle Joe is gone, Fernald remains open today, and I have questions. Why did we build walls to hold people like my uncle? And what about the 200 people that remain at Fernald? How do we understand those with severe and profound needs? Where is the line between us and them? This is my journey back to Fernald, the place left behind by many, still home for some. It's a difficult symbol of our institutional past. This is the story of how Fernald came to be, and how a diverse cast of characters came to be here. Here is Fernald. This program is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and these funders, and by the additional funders listed at the end of this program.
We all set to roll? All right, hang on, because I got to go over this little bump here unless I back up. Let me back up.
Joe Almeida lived at Fernald State School from 1950 to 1959. He's not my Uncle Joe, though they shared time at Fernald.
Now, you guys will have to forgive me because this is like only my second day of driving a big bus.
20 years after he left Fernald,
Really.
he came back
Down here on your right is the old gym and the schoolhouse.
to work at the place that used to hold him.
We call Stephen Bowen Hall. There were kids probably, I'd say, 3, 4, 5 years old in here. Little kids.
I got here when I was 9 years old. I was living in Inman Square, Cambridge. And me and my brother had an older brother that got here with me too. We finally ended up going to the East Cambridge court. So they took us in a room, gave us an aptitude test, and we were diagnosed as morons, suitable to be housed in an institution for the feeble-minded.
Idiots of the lowest class are mere organisms, masses of flesh and bone in human shape, without power of locomotion, without speech, without any manifestation of intellectual or affective faculties. Fools are a higher class of idiots who have considerable power of locomotion and animal action, partial development of their affective and intellectual faculties, but only the faintest glimmer of reason, and very imperfect speech. Simpletons are the highest class of idiots, have normal powers of locomotion and animal action, and reason enough for their simple individual guidance, but not enough for their social relations. I tell you now, gentlemen, we must have a place for these people.
Hi! I'm a sibling guardian. My sister is been here for 30 years. She has a trach, she has a G-tube, she is oxygen dependent. She has never walked, she's never talked. You know, cognitively, they've told me that she's between 4 and 5 years old. And if you look at her, you look at this little spirit trapped in this amazing body, you say to yourself, well, she must be a vegetable. She's not. The lights are on. Oh, God, here she goes. All right, check, wait it. Pat.
What, honey?
Might have to medicate
The
her.
basket? Is there something on your wastebasket? Whose junk is that?
That's mine. It's mine. I'm sorry. I'll move it. Pet's anal retentive about like her room and stuff.
She's not anal retentive. She's just very neat.
Okay,
and
no,
very,
no,
very
she's-
organized.
Let's be honest. She's a pain in the ass. I come in here with, on a Sunday morning, I'll have my big cup of coffee, and God forbid if I put it down there on the TV set, because it doesn't go there. That's how it is around here. She's very pushy.
She's a very unique individual, and she has a lot of integrity, Patty. If you're talking about somebody in front of her, she will absolutely have a fit, because she doesn't like you saying anything negative about anybody. And that's so unlike most of us. We require one-to-one for Patty right now. I mean, she would never be able to be cared for properly if she had one nurse who had 10 patients. She requires very intensive care.
I can't say enough about the team that we have. I mean, like every Thanksgiving we have this wonderful turkey dinner, and like people will come in on their day off to come and be a part of that, to be with us. And I mean, you can't buy that kind of dedication and loyalty and camaraderie. I mean, this is a really magical group of folk.
Most people avoid the sight and even thought of idiots as much as possible, and therefore fail to do their duty towards them. There is no adequate provision for the relief, care, and treatment of idiots in the Commonwealth.
Samuel Gridley Howe was a leading public figure of his time. As a young man, he traveled to Europe and supported revolutionary overthrow of kingdoms. He was jailed for his work in Greece and then deported to America, where he began to work on less radical change.
Howe had his finger into just about every reform movement that existed in the early 19th centuries, including poorhouse reform, jail reform, educational reform.
On his return to his home in Boston, Howe ran the privately funded Perkins Institution for the Blind, where some of his students were significantly mentally disabled.
If so much could be done for idiots who are blind, still more could be done for those who have sight. My sympathies for them grew stronger and stronger every day.
The light goes on, they say, oh my God, what we've been doing for the blind and deaf can be applied to people with mental retardation.
In 1848, after years of lobbying the legislature of Massachusetts, Howe formed America's first publicly supported institution for idiotic and feeble-minded youth.
Howe says, serve children. They're your biggest hope. If you serve adults, you're going to get into a whole bunch of other things. So they established schools.
Using techniques shown to be successful in Europe, Howe and his teachers focused on training the 5 senses of his students.
They believed if you set up a schedule and you kept to the routine and to the habit, mentally defected would look more like normal people and act more like normal people.
Howe established a small and controllable environment with techniques similar to today's preschool programs.
Lower level education was supposed to equip the student to earn some money or to be of some help when he went back to his family.
Howe was very strong throughout his career on small size. From about 1855 to 1865, began to write in letters to Wilbur and in his publications, we can't get any bigger, we can't get large, we'll fail if we do this.
But as time moved on, Howe's very success put pressure on him to enlarge his school and change it into a new kind of facility, an asylum, where lifelong commitment was the goal. In his final annual report, he wrote,
"The more I reflect upon the subject, the more I see objections in principle and practice to asylums. What right do we have to pack off the poor, the old, the blind into asylums? They are of us, our brothers, our sisters. They belong in families. They are deprived of the dearest relations in life in being put away in masses in asylums. Asylums generally are the offspring of a low order of feeling. Their chief recommendation often is that they do cheaply what we ought to only think of doing well."
Samuel Gridley Howe died in 1876. Shortly after his death, the trustees of his school began to build the very asylum he had warned against. a young graduate of medical school and a new breed of social scientist, Walter Elmore Fernald would lead the institution into the 20th century.
Modern usage has sanctioned the term feeble-minded to include all degrees and types of congenital mental defect, from that of the simply backward boy or girl to the profound idiot, a helpless, speechless, disgusting burden, with every degree of deficiency between those extremes. The evil effects feared from congregating a large number of this class have not been realized. We find we must congregate them to get the best results. We must have large numbers.
Open one, you're gonna eat. Open your mouth.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll hold it then. Eat your coffee.
Not today, huh? Oh, that's good, Randy. 2 hands.
Hold it cup and drink.
One of the hardest questions I was asked was, how many brothers and sisters do you have? Sometimes I would say, I have 1
Drink your
brother.
coffee.
And sometimes I would say I have 3 brothers, but that always got into more complicated explanations. Randy and Ronnie were born at 6 months of my mother's pregnancy. And when my mother saw them for the first time and held them in her hands, she said they were tiny and she didn't think they would live. They're both blind. They actually were born with sight, but the retina detached, and in the first few weeks and months of their lives, they were in a lot of pain. They were 5 years old when they came to Fernald because my parents wanted them to be able to go to school. And at that time, there was no way for children as retarded as them to go to school. So they came to Fernald. Randy doesn't have the motor coordination to, for instance, hold a spoon the way you and I hold a spoon. But he can grasp it if it's built up, even better, if it's not too thin. So the fine motor things are really, if not impossible, hard for him.
Show them that.
Food has to be set up for him in the same way so that he knows where things are. But even so, he doesn't initiate very much around eating.
Good job. Okay, that's it. Okay. You take my arm?
Ronnie had a little
All right.
less brain damage than Randy. Ronnie has very good walking and can walk on uneven surfaces and stairs.
Come up. Whoa, up this hill. Now, you know, Ronnie and Randy have pumpkins that they water in the summer. That's their therapeutic gardening. They don't really work the soil, but they love the water. And so that's what they do, which they plant pumpkins and have grown pumpkins really large. They say they're going to Topsfield Fair this year.
Directly on Walter Fernald's arrival as superintendent, he began building the new walls of the institution.
The 2 large, sunny wards on the ground floor are occupied by about 70 of the younger and feebler boys and girls. The shady groves and grassy lawns and the retired location give the children ample outdoor exercise without exposing their deformities and deficiencies to idle curiosity seekers.
For Fernald, asylum can be seen in 2 ways. In one sense, it protects those inside the asylum from those outside, as in political asylum. But in another sense, and the dominant one in Fernald's day, the asylum will keep society free from defects by putting defective people away from society.
People are beginning to become concerned about the large wave of immigrants coming into the country. We have Germans, we have Poles, we have Chinese, sort of coming here to build our country. And yet they're different. And that in many cases they live in poverty. In the census figures, you begin to see, between 1870 and 1880, you see a huge rise in the amounts of deafness, blindness, insanity, and idiocy.
In this new society we were developing, there was less and less room, so we had to find a place for them to keep them.
Residents began to become known as inmates, and the release of people into the community was seen as temporary. You were followed by a social worker, and that this was referred to as the process of parole.
A lot of these people believed initially that they were helping by being able to measure and send them in the right place and so on. It resulted, of course, in containment.
The tendency to lead dissolute lives is especially noticeable in the females. They either marry and bring forth in geometrical ratio a new generation of defectives and dependents, or become irresponsible sources of corruption and debauchery in the communities where they live.
Fernald's words about those who were at the time called the feeble-minded were moderate compared to many of his contemporaries in an age of growing scientific measurement and control.
If people with mental retardation have a genetic disorder and we can't cure them, and if they reproduce, and this is an inference, they're likely to have other people with these problems, all we're going to do is be creating a larger and larger class in our society of people who can't be well and who will drain a lot of social resources. So we'll spend less emphasis on getting them out in the community and a little more emphasis on making sure that the women don't get pregnant. And one of the first examples of that was isolation by gender.
Feeble-minded women are almost invariably immoral. In the light of our present knowledge, the only way to reduce the number of feeble-minded is to prevent their birth.
One of the answers in other places may have been to sterilize her. The other thing is to keep her away from perpetuating poor stock until she was either too old to get pregnant or too retarded to care.
I think he was trying hard for most of his professional career to believe that you really could help these folks. That's my sense. Now, I'm comparing him to people who, some of whom said, there's not a chance you can help these folks. Furthermore, they're a menace to society, and they ought to be sterilized.
Inferno was very much torn, if you would. He once organized a study, and he found to his amazement that the runaways who had been considered by the institution particular problems, that ran away, you see, were doing very well.
And while Walter Fernald built his career around institutional confinement, he also began, late in his career, to establish special programs in public schools, the roots of special education. And shortly before his death, he stunned his fellow superintendents with his words at their annual meeting.
A few years ago, wholesale institutional segregation became almost universally accepted as the only logical solution to an otherwise hopeless problem. Feeble-mindedness is not an entity, but is an infinitely complex problem. The ultimate responsibility for the care and training of the feeble-minded must be decentralized. If cared for at all, the majority of the feeble-minded in each community must be protected and helped by trained individuals in that local community.
So Walter Fernald, who had promoted segregation, came to a conclusion that was absolutely opposite.
Walter Fernald died on Thanksgiving Day, 1924. After he died, the trustees continued to fill the place he built and named the institution after him, the Walter E. Fernald State School for the Feeble-Minded, his name forever linked to the walls he created.
Now this right here is a door that goes to one of the tunnels. It's locked right now, but that goes down to a tunnel. There's tunnels all underneath these grounds. They go all the way up the hill even, up by the schoolhouse. They go all the way down the hill. They go up by the storeroom. They're all tunnels. That's where the heating pipes used to come.
When Walter Fernald's fellow superintendents published a memorial tribute to him, they ignored his call to decentralize care for the feeble-minded and instead pointed to the power plant as the fulfillment of the desire of his heart. Fernald's central power plant was linked to the many buildings of the institution by an underground network of steam tunnels, blood vessels running under the manicured lawns and gardens and roadways.
You have your east tunnel,
They were one part of a complete institution, a place like state facilities all across the country, designed to be a self-contained community, separated from the world outside its walls.
We see you. We're off to the tunnel.
80 years later, one of Fernald's residents finds comfort at the walls by the steam tunnels.
The doors were always open, and he used to like to go into dark places, so he saw that tunnel, and he got all excited about it, and he went into the tunnel. He's been going into the tunnel now, well, not into it now. He went into the tunnel for several years, like maybe about 6 or 7 years, before we finally got the doors all locked. And then now we just go to the tunnel, and he sits outside the door. And he likes it up there.
Okay, you're going to help, all right? Here, Brian, you take the blanket. Take the blanket.
Brian was born in 1959. Everything was great until he started to walk. And when he started to walk, he was really a handful. He was like having 10 kids at home, because he got into everything. I was building an addition on the end of the house. He saw me out there hammering. Well, I put the hammer down, and next thing I know, he's got the hammer, and he's hammering the top of the television set. It wasn't funny then. But anyway, that's how you had to watch him.
We never heard about anything like autism or any retardation. We didn't have any in the family. It was all kind of new to us. There was nowhere to turn except maybe a family doctor and children's hospital. They thought the sooner we got to educating them, the better.
So he went to school in a private school. First visit, the owner comes out, and he's got a beautiful dining room, and it's all glass. Big pieces of glass. So there's a couple of pieces of colored plywood here and there. And he says, "See those pieces of plywood?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Brian broke that window." So I said, "I told you, it's right in my letter that he breaks windows." They had him for 3 years, and they couldn't handle him anymore.
Well, actually, the state cut off funds.
Yeah, they cut the funds anyway.
They cut all the funds.
That's what happened.
So all those kids had to come back and be thrown, like they said, well, they mentioned this place. And this wasn't about 10 minutes from our home, and so we came here. I kept on saying, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. But after a while, I knew there was nothing out there for him. There was nothing. We just figured this is what we have to do, but it broke our hearts. You're a good guy, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go eat?
No.
You want to go eat today?
No.
You want to have lunch?
No.
Brian, can't you talk nice?
No, Daddy.
Say it nice to me.
No, thank you.
Okay, Brian. I'll see you later. See you in 5 minutes, all right?
No, thank you.
Oh, I love you, yes I do.
Bye-bye.
Lullaby, lullaby. Wish I could take care of you.
From the 1920s or 30s, really into the mid-1960s, the system really was dormant. The needs and demands of the people and their families, the resources just, they didn't exist. And so, as people just built up in the system, the staffing wasn't there, the dollars weren't there, the rehab wasn't there.
Fernald was used as a place to put many different types of individuals. I remember when I first came to Fernald, I went through the archives on some of the individuals I worked with, and people had diagnoses of things like clumsy child, thick-glassed child, promiscuous.
When you wake up sad and deep.
We came up here, me and my brother, and we sat out front while they talked to my father. Then he came out, and he started walking out the door. My brother was crying. Like I said, he was older, so he knew we were being put away. I didn't. So I says to my father, I goes, "Hey," I goes, "Dad," I goes, "where you going?" He says, "Oh," I'm going back over to that other building, he says, to get the car. And that's the last we've seen of him. I still didn't quite know what the place was until one day I looked out the window, and as you could look across, there was a building there called the North Building. And they had like a big platform, and there was these older men out there walking in a circle, their hands on top of each other's shoulders, and most of them were naked.
I've been there 27 years. I went there when I was 9.5. And I was there because put there because my father had a very heavy drinking problem. Right down here is the Wallace building down here, and that's where I used to be. They had 6 wards in it, 4 upstairs, and they had 2 downstairs. The ones that were downstairs are people that are severely retarded, severely. They had all bright kids in one ward.
The division between custodial and the more able population was between the front wards and the back wards. In the front, or bright wards, were residents who could take care of themselves and one another. In the back were those seen as beyond improvement.
I couldn't believe it. You know, I just didn't believe this existed. And the way they acted, the way they wouldn't keep clothes on, the way they would smear themselves in feces, they would sit there and rock back and forth.
Charlotte Bell, her mother and father, all worked at Fernald. What she saw through their eyes as well as her own stays with her today, 50 years later.
You know, I didn't think this happened. You know, I never heard of it. No curtains, you know, sitting on benches, you know, taking showers, lining up nude. He was like, whoa. Yeah, it was like a human warehouse.
You would have dormitories with 3 toilets and 2 of them not functioning, not working, and so on. That's just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Because at that time, nobody on the outside knew what was going on behind these walls. I don't even think the superintendent knew.
The rank and file staff had a lot of power because there was nobody to lead them.
Then it was time to go back to the building, and that was when your mind really started turning. Saying, oh my God, I gotta go back to that building, into that torture place. You know, who's there tonight? Who's on duty? Who's gonna beat me? Can you imagine living a life like that when you're a kid? 8, 9, 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, and all you thought about every day when you left the manual in the school was, who's on tonight?
I found that the most fearful part of my life, to know that you've been put into a school where nobody cares or you don't exist anymore. This is one of their punishments. You take a coat hanger, it's a piece of wood, inch and a half thick. And as you used to come out of the shower, we have an attendant who used to work there. To her, it was a joke. She used to wrap that across your backside.
I've tried running away from here a few times, you know, had no idea where I was, where to go. What am I supposed to do? I'm just a little kid, you know. They put you in Ward 22. They'd lock you up there for a couple of weeks. They'd put a pair of long johns on you and they locked you in a cell.
As you can see, there was nothing in the room. The only thing they had in the room was a mattress. You know, the person could, you know, lay on the mattress. But this here is like a heavy screening type thing, and it was like a heavy mesh screen that was put on the inside of the window so the person wouldn't, you know, break glass and cut themselves type thing. And that's what the outside of the room looked like.
When you were punished and put behind bars, you know, like a prison, and you had to have somebody go out with you, like a prison guard.
After lunch, we go into the day room. We're watching television. So this guy, Mr. Queenan, had on what he wanted to watch. And one of the kids switched the station while he walked out. He come back in, he got all mad, wanted to know who did it. So one guy got up and says, I did it. Another guy got up and said, I did it. Before you know, everybody was standing up saying they did it. And then this guy grabbed them by the seat of the pants and the scuff of the neck and ran them out through the day room, out through the hallway, and out the front door. Heaved them outside. Well, then we just started ripping everything apart, smashing all the pipes, smashing all the toilets.
Right over there. My father was like a charge attendant. Toilets, sinks, everything went flying through the windows, and they had to call the state police in to curb the riot.
We looked out the window, and it was like the hell was loaded with people. Fire engines, police cruisers. So finally about 12:30 or so, some of the guys we got together, we goes, look, there's no food here, you know, sooner or later we gotta get out of here, you know. So I yelled out that we were gonna come out. And the 15 of us climbed into the back of this paddy wagon. They closed the door and they just drove away. We had no idea where we were going. All we know is the ride seemed long. And then they opened the back of the paddy wagon. Then I find out it's Bridgewater.
But that was the thing back then. If you acted up, you went to Bridgewater. I worked at Met State. If you looked the wrong way or if you said the wrong word, Bridgewater.
Bridgewater State Hospital for the Criminally Insane was notorious in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It was the last stop for those deemed a danger. Joe, who remembers most details of his past, remembers little of his time at Bridgewater. He knows from his record that he was there for 4 months, after which he was sent back to Fernald. When he returned, he was given a job as a research assistant in the Fernald lab.
My job there was cleaning test tubes, counting and cutting brains.
Massachusetts in recent years has taken a greater interest in the problems of the mentally retarded. Primary research into causes of brain damage in children is a long and costly and rigorous assignment.
I'd have these sacks with probably about 3 or 4 brains in it, and I'd have to read off the numbers. There wouldn't be any names, but every month they would check.
Joe was also, along with 16 others, a member of the Fernald Science Club, in which they were the experiment. Researchers used radiation on them to test digestion.
I don't know why they took it out, but it was a crazy move.
But most troubling to Joe were the autopsies.
The autopsy room. That's where I used to have to go in and clean up after. Like, you know, I used to put the parts, they'd have it in a bucket in a plastic bag. Then I would take it and I would put it in a box and I would bring it down to the, the incinerator. And they threw it in the incinerator. You know, the parts they didn't put back in. But that was my job, you know.
Joe was going to be let out on parole, but within 2 months of his scheduled release, he was brought before the superintendent for beating up another resident.
He says, we talked to the board, they're adding 6 more months. That very night I left. And I've been out until I got the job here.
In 1959, Joe ran away from Fernald. The institution stopped chasing him down and sent him a formal release 6 months later. There were many more than they could handle who remained.
My mother worked as a matron at West Building. Everybody called her Ma Bell, from the facility director, who was Dr. Farrell at that time, to clients' families. The clients always called her Ma Bell.
Risking the loss of her job, Charlotte Bell's mother, the starched white representative of the institution, provided secret support to groups who wanted to publicize the horrendous conditions at Fernald.
My mother just said, you're going to go up to Fernald someday and you're going to meet a group of people and somebody's going to let you in the back door of West Building and we want you to take some pictures.
Another group, assisted by Ma Bell, published their clandestine photographs in a book, Christmas in Purgatory, by author Burton Blatt and photographer Fred Kaplan. Burton Blatt wrote, "There is a hell on earth, and in America there is a special Inferno. We were visitors there during Christmas, 1965. Although our pictures could not even begin to capture the total and overwhelming horror we saw, smelled, and felt, they represent a side of America that has rarely been shown to the general public and is little understood by most of us."
Let my song lull you to sleep. Oh, my darling lullaby.
Inferno was one of the 3 institutions on which he wrote his book.
There were many of us who wanted to, change the public schools and work with the insane, and knew that through, documentary films, knew that the state institutions were pits, and that was all in flux. And so, I had both particular and kind of group generational reasons that brought me here. The place was very idyllic looking. It did look like sort of a small college. And there was always this young guy, and he was sort of sitting there with his legs crossed and just kind of rocking, you know, and somehow he seemed like he was sort of in touch with everything, and he was like the Buddha of this place, kind of. And look at how, you know, and look at how innocent. I remember when I would go outside with them into the yard, you know, it's like I felt like, you know, like, oh God, we got to go, you know, like when the recess was over, it was like being back in grade school. Now I got to go back into the building again, you know, and stuff. And I was like, I've got to go to California. I've got to, you know, I mean, it's so like I needed to escape from Fernald myself, you know. Sadly, that was the empowering experience of being here, is that I got to go in and I got to go out.
The people of Fernald were no longer called morons. Now they were called the mentally retarded, yet they were still defined by their limitations. It took a judge to redefine the terms.
Unwashed, untended residents milled aimlessly in corridors. Some went without shoes because there wasn't the money to buy them. Most went without training or education. Once, Fernald was a model for others. But by the 1970s, things had declined to such a state that the parents had to sue for change.
Families were realizing that the civil rights of these individuals was being violated.
What I have here is the complaint that I drafted in July of 1974 in the federal court in the District of Massachusetts. It brought the subject matter of the lack of treatment of retarded persons in these facilities.
The plight of the residents and the parents came to the attention of federal judge Joseph Toro. He toured the school and was shocked by what he saw.
After the trip, I was asked for my comments by one of the TV newsmen, and what I said was that the place was a pig pen.
He witnessed a large-scale number of residents lying on the floor in a trance-like state because they had been given drugs in lieu of staff, drugs that put them to sleep.
Most citizens, including yours truly, thought that the retarded were being very well taken care of in these beautiful, in quotes, institutions that were there up on the hill, surrounded by acres of lush green grass.
In an unprecedented move, Judge Toro forged an agreement between the relatives and the state of Massachusetts to fix the broken system. The landmark decision is known as the consent decree.
It's a settlement agreement over the supervision of the federal court, and the parties are bound by that.
But by having that consent decree, it made conditions better here.
Oh.
You know, they did the buildings over, and it was a tremendous gain for all the residents here.
I saw a lot of things coming into Fernald, more money, more staffing, more programs, renovation of buildings, you know, doing more with the clients.
At the heart of the decision was the idea that every individual will have a specific treatment plan. If the need is lifelong, then the plan will be lifelong.
That used to be the drug room.
With the consent decree, Fernald State School again became a leader, not this time in its creation, but now in institutional reform and in a national movement known as deinstitutionalization. All across the country, more than 1 million people left places like Fernald behind.
Once they started programming these people from what they were then to what they are now, it was amazing, you know. They couldn't hear, you know, there was no sign language. They couldn't, you know, lip read or anything. Once those classes started, they started signing, and, you know, they were able to move on. Some of them moved on into the community.
We strive to get individuals into the community as much as possible. We run employment programs where we train people in jobs in the community. So we have a job developer that will go out and find jobs for individuals. When Fernald opened and people moved into Fernald, they weren't out in the community at all. As years have gone by and people have moved out of Fernald, people now are served in the community. They live in residences or group homes or apartments.
I do that because I like this kind of work. See, then you do mail if they get live work. But that's what they put you on when you don't have live work. They put you on something like that to keep your skills sharper.
But you'd prefer paperwork then, Barbara?
Don't make any difference as long as I'm doing something.
Yeah.
My foster mother put me in Inferno school because she was sick. So she couldn't take care of me anymore. So she's the one that sent me to Inferno school when I was 11.
Do you remember what time of year it was?
When Elvis Presley was, either was his birthday or when he died. And I got out at 77. My life's better now. Me and my roommate can go to Dunkin' Donuts by ourselves. We can go to the mall. We can go shopping. I work in the dish room at Bentley College. I do everything in here. Like the silverware, all the glasses, put them on the cup rack, glass racks on the top where they go.
People see those kind of residents, the 90% of the retarded population that's not as disabled, does have some ability to make decisions. But there is a group that would not be safe at all.
What do you want to do? I know, you want to go outside. We're going to do that later. Yeah.
Well, Patty communicates with her eyes, and you can ask Patty yes, no questions. She'll look up with her eyes to say yes, and down or straight ahead to say no. She interacts like you or I. It's just that she can't verbalize, and she's at a younger age, even though she's 38 years old. Is it daytime? That's a yes. That's pretty quick. Is it nighttime? She's just, looking straight ahead, which is no. From day one, I could see she would respond to things that were going on with her facial expressions. If you were leaving, Patty will frown like that. If you come in and you have a Band-Aid on your finger, she'll be looking at it, frowning and looking at you, looking at the Band-Aid, looking at you, saying what happened. I'm gonna go this way. Maybe I should have grabbed the umbrella. Close your eyes, Pat. Do you want it, Maureen? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Here we are, Chickie.
We're at Mimi's little garden. It's Mimi and Patty were like sisters. It was like the girls. What are the girls gonna do today?
Yeah.
Definitely. And, we would say, Mimi, don't say anything to Patty, that we're going to the mall today, or that we're, today we're gonna have a party or whatever, because Patty would get so excited that her breathing would get all, compromised. And so, it's so funny to be here without Mimi.
It was about a year ago that Mimi just started to fail. She had massive organ failure, and she passed. It was hard, like right after Mimi's passing, it was hard to do, to think about doing this, but we were ready to do it this year. So that's what we did. What makes all of our mortality that much closer is Pat's guardian. The hardest thing for me was to explain her passing. And I remember I went and bought Pat a little Bible and a little frame for Mimi's picture. And then when I got to the door, I said, oh God, give me the words. Give me the words to be able to explain this to her so that she'll understand. So I did as good a job as I could. I just said sometimes people's bodies get tired and they get weak and they don't work anymore. And God takes you home. And he takes you home to a beautiful, beautiful place. And there's no more pain, and there's no more suffering, and there's no more doctors and nurses and hospitals, and you can run, and you can play, and you can talk, and I think Pat really got that. I really do. And this is a kid they said that would never live to be 12, and she's 38. We're coming to the end of our run, but there's still a lot of people here who need care. You know what? We got to tie your shoes. People like me think there's room for a whole spectrum of care, and that includes a congregate care type setting like this, or what you call an intermediate care setting, which is a more intensive nursing care setting.
and that's humane and the least restrictive environment for some kinds of people.
Okay? Give me a kiss. Give me a kiss. That's okay.
Well, Randy and Ronnie will never be productive in any of the traditional sense of that word, the sense of earning money, the sense of having work, of providing for anyone else. They will never even be independent in providing for themselves in a society that values productivity and the ability to give to others. We could say their lives have no worth. Now, I will say that I have come to appreciate how their lives give us a chance to be heroes, little heroes, everyday heroes. And they're all over this campus of people who have not just done a job, but cared for these people, really cared for them.
All right. There's 200 acres here with the cemetery. Long line of groundskeepers, you know. When I started here, there were 11, yeah. And there's only 3 of us left. It's pretty difficult. I'm doing work in places with flower beds and mowing the grass and that type of stuff where guys have been doing it for years, hundreds of years, you know, 150 years or more. And, you know, I'd hate to think that, you know, I'm the last of a breed, you know. The clients have been working here for all of those 150 years. I mean, back when this was a working farm, there was a crew of 30 clients that worked here, residents. And they were proud of their work, weren't they, John?
He sure was.
I mean, working for the farm was a respectable job. You're the last in a long line of, well, you could be the last in a long line.
Yeah, it could be.
And now, Fernald's contemporary history, as full of irony and contradictions as its past.
On February 26th, Governor Romney announced his plan to close Inferno facility. The governor has also announced a plan to sell off the land here at Inferno, out underneath the services that are being provided here.
They had 2,000 when Brian came in, and think of it now, they looked at all of these people and they shipped them out one at a time because of their qualifications, whether they could make it in the community or not. Well, these 300 never made it. They didn't make the cut.
The department has yet to prove that they can take care of, you know, people with this level of disability out in the community. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, we fight to the bitter end.
And the Fernald advocates took their fight to the Massachusetts State House, where they presented a petition to the governor.
Here with the Coalition of Families and Advocates for the Retarded. And we are presenting to you today 5,626 signatures strongly opposing the closure of Fernald Center.
This is not an issue of better services at Fernald versus community. This is an issue of the state saving money.
If they're doing it cheaper, they're not servicing the kids, you know. They're not giving them the things they're supposed to be given. They're not abiding by the consent decree.
Throughout the time we were shooting, the Romney administration declined to comment for this film.
Someone like myself who has spent 10 years in a community agency bringing people back from Belchertown State School and trying to prevent other people from landing in such a facility, I should be jumping up and screaming, but I'm cautiously saying if the only grounds for this is not moral or philosophical or a belief that this really is a better way to go, but is predominantly a economic motive, the cheapest thing to do for people with mental retardation might be to do nothing.
I know in some regards it's offended some of the, you know, the purists in the field who, you know, feel that any kind of congregate care is inappropriate. But, you know, I point to what's going on in the country relative to the aging population and what's the greatest kind of growth service for elders, seniors, continuing care communities, assisted living. What is assisted living? What's a continuing care community? Probably the same concept that Dr. Fernald and Samuel Cridley Howe was to create a community where people with maybe similar needs, interests, or issues could come together to receive focused attention.
You're still here. You're
outside.
Outside now for good. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Patty enjoys church. Sometimes she just goes over during the week and sits in the church and looks at the flowers. It's a nice outing.
From the greatest to the least are gathered in this same faith. If you want to be great, if you want to be number one, remember, the least among you is first. I'm just a boy with a stranger, traveling through this world of woe. There's no sickness, no
It's kind of strange. I'm working here now. You don't think I think that's strange? I think it's very weird. But I have to keep saying in my mind, Joe, this is not the same place you was at. This is, and I wanted to quit a few times, but then I said, where am I going to get the kind of money I make here? Where am I going to get these benefits? I still feel that they owe me. I feel because of me being here, how they treated me, even after I left here, I was in trouble all the time. And that's one of the reasons I lost a lot of jobs, because I couldn't, nobody was going to tell me what to do again.
Like the Fernald advocates, Joe and Vic and others came to the State House to present a petition, not to keep Fernald open, but looking for an apology for the past and compensation for their years of forced labor.
It wasn't the money. It was that, something that was more important to me anyways.
These men had their childhood robbed from them. They were denied a proper, reasonable education, and then they were dumped back into society to fend for themselves. They were labeled morons. They were called imbeciles. They were called feeble-minded. And they were normal children dumped into the state school system. We want their records cleaned up.
My past was coming back. The problems were coming back in life. But I'm starting to settle into it now. I'm not letting it bother me as much as I did. At first, it was kind of a dream of going back to what you were.
I kept saying, they were going to punish me or something. I kept saying, you can't do it. I don't live here no more. I don't live here no more, And I'd wake up and it'd be only a dream,
You learn, you build a wall, and you build a solid wall. Nobody can get through to you. And you can usually push things to the side. And I think that's what we all done over the years. I've done it myself. And my wife can't get through to me a lot of times. She'll say, it's a waste of time. I just can't get through. You got a wall here. I just can't get through it.
When his time is up, we tell him what time it is, and we give him 5 minutes longer. Like give him a chance to get up, because he normally won't get up. We have to call staff to get him out of the tunnel. Hi, this is Mr. Hughes at the tunnel. Yeah, can you send someone up? Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
I bet you're gonna get up all by yourself, right? Okay, I'll wait in the car. Okay, you can get the mat and bring up the blanket, all right?
Let's go, Brian.
No!
Stop screaming, okay?
No screaming like that. Screaming don't hurt you.
Okay, let's go.
No!
Let's go, let's go.
Screaming don't hurt you. Scream won't hurt you. It's not the truth now. No! No!
Let's go, let's go.
No! No screaming!
I'll give you 5 more minutes, okay?
No 5 minutes today! I don't care about screaming!
Blessings on the east and west.
There are tremendous analogies between our historical past in the field of developmental disabilities and today.
And on my bird in your name.
And we need to ask ourselves the question of what is our will? What do we really want to do for people who need our help and assistance? Which is always the question with people who are different from ourselves.
My own view of Fernald has changed through time.
When you wake up sad and deep,
I've come to see that institutions are the places where we've drawn the line between ability and disability.
let my song lull you to sleep.
At once fixed by the walls of the institution, time has shown me that the line changes because we change and what we see changes. The line between ability and disability is in me.
And if we never meet again, lullaby, lullaby, hold me in your heart, best friend. Oh, my darling, lullaby.
This program is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and these funders.
Mm-hmm.